Right, so welcome everybody. Tonight we're going to be chatting a little bit about cross-contamination of gluten in the home. My name is Nicole Byram, and I am one of the registered dietitians with Celiac Canada. And tonight I am joined by Kaylee McCauley. Kaylee, I'll let you give yourself a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylee McCauley, and I am the other dietitian with CCA. I am the health promotion manager there, and I am from Prince Edward Island.
Yes, and I'm so happy to have Kaylee joining me this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're joining us from. And thank you for letting us know where everybody's coming from. I always love to know what part of Canada or elsewhere that people are joining us from. So Kaylee's all the way over in PEI, and I am on the West Coast. I'm in North Vancouver, sunny today. I feel like we're holding on to the last grips of summer in Vancouver, and things are going to start falling apart here pretty soon. So I'm going to enjoy the sunshine as long as I can get it. So tonight's just a little bit of homework, housekeeping before we get started. For official questions, I'd like you to look along the bottom bar and you'll see the Q&A there. And here we will, I'll get you to ask your official questions, and then we will be answering those at the very end. So please pop those in as we're talking. Don't save putting them in till the end. You can put them in at the very beginning. And then at the end, Kaylee and I will be going through them one by one. If you put the questions in the chat, they might be missed. So please make sure to put those in the official Q&A. Feel free to chat respectively with each other in the chat section, but we won't officially address those questions. So tonight we are chatting about cross-contamination in the home, because we know that for those people diagnosed, cross-contamination is a very frightening thing. And, you know, most of our meals are in our home. So let's make sure we're safe and eating safely. I'm just going to get this into presentation mode, but I need to, sorry guys, I need to pull this down, slideshow. There we go. Start from the beginning. All right. Oh, and I'm going to take off those subtitles. Okay, we are going to kick this off with a poll, because as you could tell at the beginning when I was creating the polls, I love polls, and I wanted to quiz you guys before we got started on a few things. So I'm going to launch the first poll. So the question is, do you need to replace pots and pans in your home to prevent cross-contamination? I'm wondering if at the very beginning we actually gave this away, Kaylee. I didn't realize that we were in full mode. I thought we were in a practice session.
I don't think we did.
Okay.
Ooh, some variety.
Yes, we've got a split. I love it. I love it. And happy birthday to CCA, who turned 50 years old this year. For any of you who are new to Celiac Canada, you should check out our website at www.celiac.ca, and you can always donate. There's a donate button right at the top. And we're celebrating our 50th year of serving Canada and our community. Okay, let's end this poll and see what we've got. And I'm going to share the results. Okay. 19% said yes, you need to change your pots and pans out. 57% said no, you don't. And 24% said they're not sure. And 24%, that's why you're here tonight. So we are going to talk about just that. So I'm not going to give away the answer. We're going to find it out, and then we're going to revisit that. I am going to go to the next poll question. I think. Okay, the next poll question is, do you need a separate toaster? More confidence in this one. I'll give you a hint on this one. Well, no, I won't. I won't say anything. Don't want to give anything away. Although 90% of you are pretty confident. All right, 49 out of 54 have participated. Anybody else? Last minute entries? 50. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to end the poll. Okay, sharing the results. 90% of you think that you need a separate toaster. Again, we are going to talk about it, but I love it. Okay, final poll question. And this is just because I want to know. Are you newly diagnosed with celiac disease in the past year? Yes, no, or my family or friend was, or I'm not diagnosed with celiac disease, but maybe you're here because you haven't been diagnosed, you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or you have a gluten intolerance. So that's what that category there is for. Can you guys not answer that question?
This poll isn't showing up on the screen.
Okay, interesting. Let's try that again. Interesting. Allow panelists to vote. Let me try that. No, not working. Ended. Okay, why is that not working? How strange. Can you guys see it or no? All right, that was just for my own personal information gathering. So let's not worry about it. I'm going to assume a lot of you here tonight are newly diagnosed, or you have a family or friend who is newly diagnosed. So let's not worry about that. Let's just get going with the presentation. So cross-contamination in the home. Without further ado, let's get going. So tonight we are going to keep this conversation fairly short and sweet. I want to leave lots of time for conversation with the community, with you guys, and open for questions, because that's where we're really going to help you the most, I think. But let's start by talking about a few kitchen hotspots. So these are areas in your kitchen where cross-contamination is going to be at most risk. But before we go there, let's talk about what is cross-contamination, just so we're all starting from the same place. So when we're talking about cross-contamination or otherwise cross-contact, those two words in Canada are interchangeable. The reason that we here at the CCA and in Canada are using the term cross-contamination over cross-contact is because at this point in time, Health Canada is giving us that language as the appropriate language to use. It's the language they use in their websites. So we are following their lead, and I've actually sent them an email to confirm that. And yes, we are in fact to use that term. You will see the term cross-contact used as well quite a bit, especially in the US. Both of them, for our purposes today, they mean the same thing. So what that means is for somebody who is on a gluten-free diet or celiac, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or gluten intolerant, we can't have any gluten. And so if there's cross-contact or cross-contamination, it means a gluten-free item has come into contact with gluten and it is now contaminated with gluten and and then you as the person could ingest it and it could make you sick. So it is any time that gluten is where it shouldn't be and it ends up on a gluten-free food item. So the first place that we're going to talk about is our kitchen sink. The kitchen sink, it gathers a lot of stuff, but our dish cloths and our sponges can be a real area of trapping gluten. So sponges and cloths in particular, if you have a home that has both, sorry, I've got a cat swarming me right now, and so I'm waiting for him to pounce. If you have a house like I do, in my home, 2 out of 5 of the family members have celiac disease, so we're a primarily gluten-free home. However, we do have some gluten-containing items in the home. So for example, my eldest daughter enjoys pierogies to eat. For those of you who cook pierogies, remember cooking pierogies, they can get stuck on the bottom of the pan and they're quite pasty. And so if you were to take your sponge and clean the pan with that gluten is now on your sponge. And there's a risk of cross-contamination when you use it on another item. So when I'm talking about cross-contamination, it's not that it's guaranteed to happen every time. It's that there is a risk involved. So every time we're talking about something like this, we're talking about risk assessment and decreasing or mitigating that risk to keep our members of their family safe from becoming sick. Because as we know, even the smallest amount of cross-contamination can cause a reaction in some of our community. and make them very ill and make them miss things. My daughter just 2 nights ago had to miss an entire evening of dance, which when you're in competitive dance, it's a big deal. So she was really, really unwell and very unhappy as well. So kitchen cloths and sponges are an area that we have to be watchful for. What I often do is I will use paper towel, and you'll see this as a recurring theme throughout this conversation. I will use paper towel to do that cleanup, and then I'll throw the paper towel into the green waste, give it a good rinse, and then we'll move on. You can safely clean gluten in your sink off of a product and make it safe for your family. Number 2, kitchen cupboards. I'm just gonna let this cat come on my lap now. Kitchen cupboards. So we have a couple of rules of thumb for our kitchen cupboards. This is a very neat kitchen cupboard. This is not my kitchen cupboard, just so everybody is aware. Mine is not this neat or organized. If we were storing both gluten-containing and gluten-free items in our cupboard, we would want to place the gluten-free items on top and the gluten-containing items below. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, gravity is the reason why. We don't want gluten-containing crumbs falling onto our gluten-free items. Think about cereal packages. You know, if you're opening a thing of cereal, quite often the bag's not fully rolled down. There can be gluten coming out of it, spilling out of it, and then falling on top of something. There is a risk for cross-contamination. So always store your gluten-free items on the bottom and your gluten-containing items. Sorry, said that wrong. Always store your gluten-free items on top and your gluten-containing items down below to keep yourself safe. Okay, so that is the rule of thumb for cupboards. Now, if you have gluten-containing items in a cupboard, the other thing we want you to do is keep it in a sealed container. One of my rules in our house is we don't have any loose flour that contains gluten. I personally find it far too risky, because if you think about those, remember, everybody knows the yellow bags of flour, the Robin Hood bags, when you roll it up and everything poofs out and then it's coated kind of everywhere. So I actually don't allow that in my house. For people who do, be very cautious about when you're opening and closing it, and then keep it in either like a Rubbermaid or a Tupperware, so that it's completely sealed and it's not going to allow any airborne flour out of it. It's a good rule of thumb to keep all gluten-containing items in sealed containers. That way they're just, again, mitigating that risk for cross-contact in the house. In the fridge, this is our third hotspot in our kitchen, our fridge. So we have a few suggestions. One of the suggestions is that we use squeeze bottles rather than jars. So imagine you've got your parents over for brunch one morning, and you have your 2 toasters out, and you've got your gluten-containing toaster out, and then they have a piece of bread, and they go to get some strawberry jam, and they put it on their toast, and then they go back into the strawberry jam. Well, that jam is now cross-contaminated with gluten because your knife has touched the bread and then it has gone back in. I remember growing up as a kid, you'd open the jam jar and you'd see like butter or something else that was not supposed to be in the jar. And I remember as a child thinking it was kind of gross. And now, as an adult dietitian working for Celiac Canada, I recognize that was cross-contamination. And for somebody who has an allergy or an autoimmune disease like celiac disease, that can be very risky and very dangerous. So we have to be very careful. So think about mayo, think about margarine, think about jams and jellies, peanut butters, Nutellas, all that sort of thing we have to be very careful about. And so for the mustard, ketchup, relish, mayo family, we can buy squeeze bottles. Make sure with those squeeze bottles that you don't touch the bread with it. Sometimes kids will kind of smear it on. So make sure the tip is always kept clean. And when you see somebody new who's not a family member who might not know the rules of the house, just say, do you mind just making sure that doesn't touch your bread? Because we have to make sure we keep whomever safe in our family from cross-contamination. If you do have jars and you do have family members who use it with gluten-containing versus gluten-free, food items, label it. So we, for the longest time, we were using a label maker. It became a little bit too labor intensive to pull the label maker out and make it every time. I now just get a big old Sharpie and I just Sharpie the heck out of the top, the sides, and the other side so that there's no way anybody will miss it. You don't want somebody to miss that what they're about to put on contains gluten. So have a common saying that you'll put, either like gluten-free or contains gluten or not safe. Come up with a word or a phrase that's very clear to put on your package. We'll just sometimes say like no, and then big X's all over it to know that that is not safe for my husband and for my daughter. But again, easier just to keep everything safe and gluten-free at the same time. Okay, number 4, ovens. I'm gonna make this into not just, I think it's singular. So we're gonna make this plural, ovens. So we're talking air fryers, convection ovens, toasters, toaster ovens. We're going to talk a little bit about toaster bags and dedicated toasters. So if you have a convection oven, which I have, you are fine to keep using it, but you take it off the convection setting and just have it on the bake setting. Almost always you'll be able to do this. Convection ovens will blow air up and cause circulating air in your oven, and that might blow up flour or dust of gluten particles and put it on your gluten-free food items. So we want to make sure that we're really safe. So keep it on just regular old bake, and you are just fine. It's not going to have that circulating air that you once had. If you are wanting to use your convection oven and your family is going gluten-free and there's not going to be any more gluten put into that oven, you can always give it a really, really good clean. And again, when we're talking about risk assessment, that's going to lower that risk immensely. The other thing about ovens, if you are cooking, that was the dog now. I live in a house full of animals. If you are cooking, always make sure, say you've got 2 pizzas, one has gluten in it, one is gluten-free. Always make sure, just like your cupboards, the gluten-free item is on top and the gluten-containing item is below. We never want to risk gluten falling onto our gluten-free item. We want to keep our family safe. Another good rule of thumb would be just to cover that gluten-free item, make sure there's no risk of anything getting onto it. Or vice versa, you might want to cover the gluten-containing item so that we know it's not going to cross-contaminate anything. But below and on top, again, we're always thinking about gravity here. How can gluten get onto my food? It could fall onto it. So we're wanting to make sure about that. So I kind of started at number 2 there. Let's go back to number 1, air fryers. We want to have dedicated air fryers for our family members with celiac disease. Air fryers and toasters are going to go together here. 90% of you said dedicated toaster. You were right. You want to have your own toaster for the family members in your household that have celiac disease. One of the first things we did for my daughter is we went out and we got her a nice fun toaster, and she decorated it with stickers. She was 5 when she was diagnosed, so there was no doubting which toaster was hers. Don't get 2 toasters that look similar. There's going to be a mistake made. And again, if family or friends, or we host international students, if you have students in your house, make sure that everybody's clear on the rules of the home as to how we keep our family members with celiac disease safe from cross-contamination in the house. So toasters and air fryers need to be dedicated in order to make sure they're safe. Now, some air fryers have the 2 compartments. If you can remember, they are separate chambers. They have separate heats. They have separate cooking settings. So they are entirely separate. If you can always remember that the left side's gluten-free and the right side is gluten, then you could possibly have a shared air fryer. Now, in my estimation, that's just too hard. That would be confused at some point in time, and somebody would put the wrong drawer in the wrong place. And if the color coordination, anyways, it sounds too confusing for my brain, and my daughter and her level of anxiety wouldn't be happy with that. So we keep ours dedicated. There's not a lot of gluten that you need to put in an air fryer anyways. So that is my conversation on that one. Now, if you are not toaster people, you're toaster oven people, we can do this in a safe fashion by sharing a single toaster oven. One thing you can do is put down tinfoil. Tinfoil and parchment are going to become very good friends of yours in order to help with cross-contamination. You can do that. You can make sure that those the grates are clean every single time. But nothing is going to blow up in a toaster oven, so that will be safe. If you are traveling, which a lot of us do, travel is a big part. When I put out a poll on Facebook and asked people, what do you want us to talk more about? Dining out was number one and travel was number two. Toaster bags are going to be a really good friend of yours. So you can order them on Amazon. They're not expensive and they last for a really long period of time. We like to go to places that have kitchens in it so we can have an easy breakfast and lunch in our hotel. So toaster bags come with us every time so that we know my husband and my daughter can safely have toast and there's no risk of cross-contamination. So they're really easy to use. The last thing I wanted to add into here with oven, and it's not quite in the kitchen, but it's close enough, it's a cooking thing, is barbecue. So keep your barbecue grates gluten-free. A lot of people barbecue with sauces that have soy sauce in them, which will be a source of gluten, of course, a source of cross-contamination. So if you are using a shared barbecue, please barbecue on either stone that is dedicated or get yourself some tinfoil, because that will work just as well. Same thing goes when you go over to friends' houses. Keep yours wrapped up in tinfoil and just say, I'd like to enjoy the evening. I don't want to get sick. So let's use some tinfoil to help keep me safe. So that is ovens. Okay, the fifth hotspot in your kitchen is cooking equipment. This is where we get a lot of conversation. And again, this is about mitigating risk, reducing risk levels. So porous items in your kitchen can trap gluten particles. What does that look like? So porous items look like wooden cutting boards, particularly old wooden cutting boards that might have grooves in them or splinters where something can get trapped. Colanders, the little holes, gluten can get trapped in those really easily. Wooden spoons, again, same thing, especially old ones, they can get trapped. So make sure that you get either new wooden cutting boards or don't use those ones for yourself, or switch to like a glass cutting board, a new plastic cutting board, or a new wooden cutting board. And then, wooden spoons, I love, especially baking with a wooden spoon, but mainly we've just switched to metal spoons in our house because they clean up really nicely. And they're safe to share amongst the family, because we don't want you to have to buy all new cooking equipment. And we certainly don't want you to have separate sets of cooking equipment. We want the one kitchen to be able to, I don't know about you guys, but my kitchen's not big enough to host two whole sets of everything. So remembering you can share pots and pans. That was our number one question. Can you safely share pots and pans? With cooking equipment, yes, you can. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, in the conversation. But the biggest things is I want you to look at your cooking equipment and say, could gluten get trapped somewhere in this? If it can, that increases my risk a little bit. So colanders, we only have one colander in our house, but we don't use any gluten-containing pasta. And the only other thing we would do is wash berries in it or rinse off legumes in it. So no gluten there at all. So we don't have any gluten in our colander. So you might be like that as well. So just start that and then keep it dedicated. Same thing for the cutting boards and the wooden spoons. Okay, we've talked about the 5 kitchen hotspots. Let's talk about the safe zones in the kitchen. Where can I actually breathe easy and not be super stressed? Dishes. I talked about not having to have 2 sets of cutlery and everything. You don't have to have 2 sets of dishes. Dishes clean really well. You can safely wash your dishes by hand. You can safely put your dishes in the dishwasher. Either method is going to remove the gluten particles and make those dishes safe for your entire family. You can safely sit at the same table with your family member and not worry about gluten contamination. Somebody can sit next to you and be eating something, and you can sit next to them and be eating your gluten-free meal. And the food is not going to not going to, you can't breathe it in at that point unless there's flour dust or something. But it is, again, very, very low risk. You can sit at the same table and enjoy a meal with people having gluten. So think about sitting in a restaurant. Your person sitting next to you is having a plate of regular pasta. You've got your gluten-free meal. You're absolutely fine to do this. There's no risk involved there. You can have, excuse me, the same clean dishware, cutlery, pots and pans. So cutlery comes up a lot because, you know, the prongs of the fork, people wonder if that's a source of cross-contamination. It is not. You know, assuming you've given them a rinse before they go in the dishwasher, so there's no chunks of something that might get cooked on there, you're fine. So don't worry about that. Finally, dish soap, the fridge, and gluten can't be hidden in food. So let's talk about these. Dish soap, we've had people ask us, does my dish soap need to be gluten-free? Dish soap doesn't contain gluten. You don't need to worry about it. You can use whatever dish soap you want to. It's getting rinsed off. You're good to use whichever one you want. Get the one that's on sale. Food prices are so high right now. Let's save some cost with our dish soap. The fridge. You can safely put things in your fridge. Again, we're going to talk about that gravity rule. So if there's something with gluten in it, maybe put it on one of the lower shelves, and the gluten-free items that are leftovers on the upper shelves. Again, we don't want anything falling on it. Most often things in fridges are sealed or covered in order to keep them fresh. So less likely to have cross-contamination in the fridge, but thinking about that rule of above and below, stick to that. And then finally, gluten cannot be hidden in food. So just wanting to remind you of our labeling guide on our website, www.celiac.ca. Our dietitians working group has put together an incredible labeling guide that walks you through how to feel comfortable and safe with reading labels and knowing what is safe for you or your family members and that won't make them sick. Okay. So that is, it's an excellent resource and I highly recommend it. The other recommendation I'm going to make is if you are kind of feeling like you've taken in a lot of information tonight, you want to watch it and you want to watch it in my kitchen, you can click on this. I'm just going to play a second of it. I am going to share my sound. Sorry, guys, share sound. I'm going to play this for you just for a quick sec so you get an idea of what this video is and whether or not you want to watch it. Hi, my name is Nicole Byram, and I'm the Health Promotions Manager for the Canadian Celiac Association. Welcome to my shared kitchen. I'm going to jump ahead. Many families have both celiac and non-celiac family members, making cross-contamination in the kitchen an issue. What is cross-contamination? Cross-contamination is when a gluten-free item has been contaminated with a gluten-containing item. Here's some examples. If you have gluten on your countertop, cloths can become easily contaminated. Ensure when using knives never to double dip after touching a gluten-containing item. Always ensure cooking equipment is clean and free of gluten. Watch out for flour-filled rolls and buns as they are a possible source of cross-contamination. Always ensure gluten-filled flour is sealed and safely stored away from your gluten-free items. Now that we've seen some examples, let's talk about some kitchen hotspots. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can watch. So it pretty much goes over what we've talked about this evening. And you can just get a little bit more. If you couldn't quite visualize what I was talking about today, that'll give you more of a visual of what we're talking about. Some other resources, and remember, Celiac Canada is a charity. Everything we do pretty much is free to you. So our labeling guide I talked about, Every month, myself and one of our wonderful volunteers, Linda Nielsen, we host a gluten-free 101. So every month you can look at our website and there's a sign up, and we talk about all this, and we talk about traveling, and we talk about dining out, and we talk about how to read labels, and we talk about cross-contamination, and we talk about just about anything else that you guys want to talk about because we answer all your questions. You can check out our website. You can sign up for our Living Gluten-Free Guide. It's an amazing guide that you can print up and have. Also, don't forget, we've got a toll-free line and an email that if you have questions, you can always call or email us, and we're happy to answer that. Okay, lastly, our newly diagnosed pathway is an amazing resource that you can sign up for. And what this does is it gives you information into your inbox. It's emails that come to you with curated information right when you need it in your stage of diagnosis. So we'll send you things again on all the topics that you want to know about, including different vitamins and minerals. Say you're iron deficient. How do you increase your iron levels? Well, you'll find out in the newly diagnosed pathway. Or you've been told your vitamin D levels are low, or you're struggling with constipation now that you're diagnosed. How do I get more fiber in a gluten-free diet? We talk about all of this in our newly diagnosed pathway. So sign up for that. The sign up link is on our website. And it's a great program. So I invite you, and again, it's free to use. All right, question time.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, everybody. I hope I didn't go too fast. I wanted to get all my words out so that we had lots of time for questions. And I know everybody's busy.
Yeah, no, that was great. We have lots of questions that came in that I answered already, but we can go through. There's some that are still open. So if you have any other questions, just pop them in the Q&A box and I can answer them, or we can go through them and answer them. This is a good one. It was an anonymous member. If someone's baking with gluten flour, i.e. wheat flour, what do we have to do to make the kitchen safe? For example, do we have to wait a certain amount of time for flour dust to settle, etc.?
Yeah, this is a super question. I should have included that actually in my presentation. Thank you for bringing it up. As I mentioned in my presentation, I don't allow gluten-containing flour to be used in my kitchen or to be cooked with because it is not safe. And as a dietitian, I've actually seen clients come to me whose TTG is just not coming down because they do a lot of gluten-containing baking for their family. And it can be a really tricky thing because remember, gluten has to be absorbed into our body through our ear, nose, or throat because it needs to access our digestive system. Gluten doesn't absorb in our skin. This is why we don't worry about lotions or potions or creams or whatever else we put on our body, skincare, shampoo and conditioner. We don't worry about that being gluten containing because it's not accessing our mouth. We're not breathing it in. It's not accessing our throat. Really nothing's going to get into our ears, but our ears do channel into the digestive system eventually. So we worry about breathing in flour. So this brings us to your question, which is if somebody is baking, how do we keep the kitchen safe? Ideally, nobody's baking with gluten-containing flour in your kitchen. Ideally, if you want to really minimize the risk, but while still doing it, there are a few things you could do. So you shouldn't be the one doing the baking. If you're the one with celiac disease, ideally, you're not doing the one doing the baking. If you are doing the baking, putting on a well-fitting mask will help reduce the risk. And you can do that. Flour does stay airborne for a while afterwards. I have not found any evidence to tell me how long it stays in the air for. I've looked for it. Kaylee, have you found that information anywhere?
No, I just know it can settle on things too. Yeah,
it can settle on things, but it can actually remain in the air for a certain amount of time. It is quite heavy, so it will eventually land, but I wish I could tell you 3 hours, 4 hours, half an hour. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that keeping the area well ventilated would be helpful as well. Again, how can I reduce my risk of breathing this in? Well, ventilation, wearing a mask. If you're not the one doing the cooking and somebody else is, really leaning on and using those paper towels. So what I would do is I would lay out paper towels. So again, you're not having the flour landing on the counter. And then when they're done, wrapping it all up, putting it in the green bin, and then giving it all of a wipe down again. just making sure that it hasn't landed on the apples in the fruit jar or landed on, the kitchen,
Or if you have a
the
sandwich laying
sponges.
out. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
just again, think about the fact that flour goes airborne and it can land on things, and we can breathe it in. So how can I reduce that risk? And those are a few tips on how to do that.
And I will also say, like,
Yeah.
do all of the gluten-free baking or cooking first before anything with regular flour comes into play, and
Yeah.
have it well
Yeah.
wrapped and stored in the fridge.
Yeah. Okay, Maddie. Um, I live in a small apartment with no dishwasher, so we are hand washing everything. Could you go into more information, tips, tricks on how to safely clean dishes in a dual household? So Maddie, wondering if you are, I'm assuming you're washing all the dishes at the same time, that the meal contains both gluten-free and gluten-containing items. You're fine to put it all in the same water, wash them all up, make sure they're rinsed really, really well. This is where we get into the rinsing. Make sure everything is well rinsed and there's no particles of food left on anything, and then you're fine.
Yeah, soap and water is fine. And I would say too, if you're using a dishwasher, just as always, make sure you clean the filter regularly.
Perfect.
We have one. Is there a timeline for the gluten-free 201 session?
Yeah, we talked about that last year. And if you join the newly diagnosed pathway, we have a gluten-free 101 and a gluten-free 201 that you get to see on that one. We haven't done a live gluten-free 201 yet for the veterans or for the kind of the longer standing celiacs. But what I would say to that, Aaliyah, is that our webinar Wednesdays in May, quite often we have some stuff for the more advanced members, and also our conference is a wonderful opportunity for kind of more advanced learning, but we haven't officially launched a 201 at this point.
This is a good one. If from Mallory, if you cook gluten pasta and gluten-free pasta side by side, is there a risk of cross-contamination from the steam?
Very good question. The first thing that comes to my mind, Mallory, is that separate spoons. Separate spoons. Don't use the same spoon, because I've had this exact situation. My daughter was at a play date then, she was younger, and the father called me and he said, I'm cooking her gluten-free Annie's and a gluten-containing Annie's, but I took the spoon from the gluten one and put it into the gluten-free one. And he said, is she okay to eat it? And I said, no, she's not. I'm sorry. And I felt really bad, but I wasn't going to put my daughter at risk because she will get extremely ill. So I said, I'm sorry. I said, you might as well just dump it all together and give it to your kids. The steam, I don't think so. I have not heard of steam being a risk in any of the literature or heard it in any conversation. So I'm going to say quite safely that no, that would not be a risk for cross-contamination, but great question.
From Nick, can you safely scrub a wooden cutting board really well?
Yeah, Nick,
it can be done, but the risk is high
yeah,
because
yeah,
I think it's because the crevices too within the
yeah,
wooden cutting boards and even wooden utensils, gluten
yeah,
can hide in it. So even if you think you got it really well and
yeah,
it's clean, there still could be
yeah,
gluten hidden.
yeah. It's, how old, how crevicey, how like it's again, this is kind of up for personal choice and your own risk assessment. There's a risk. If it was brand new and it's still pretty smooth, the risk is lower. If it was your grandma's and it's got some big crevices in it, the risk is higher for sure.
My GI told me not to use spices, even gluten-free spices, only salt and grind your own pepper. You agree?
No, no,
Oh,
no, 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 no. Your GI is wrong.
yeah,
I can
spices.
quite firmly tell you and safely tell you, it's your spices. We have enough restriction in our diet that we are missing out on things already. You don't need to miss out on flavor and spice with your food. There are spices labeled gluten-free. McCormick's are one of them, but you also don't have to use gluten-free labeled spices. As long as, remember, in Canada, our labeling laws are very robust and they're very trustworthy. If there is no, and you'll check this out in the labeling guide, because you're all going to go to our website and you're all going to print it up and put it on your fridge. You'll be able to see that if there's no brow ingredients, so barley, rye, regular oats, or wheat, in the ingredients list or in a contain statement or a may contain statement, then you're safe to use it. Most spices only include the single ingredient of the spice and they're fine. What I will caution you on is if you go somewhere and the spices are in a little baggie and they're served like that, don't buy them. Only buy spices that are in a sealed container that have both French and English on them, and they clearly have an ingredients list labeled. So we have to play by the set of rules here, right? We need to make sure we're reading our ingredients list. We're not buying stuff from small mom and pop shops that we're not quite sure what could be in there. So just be safe in that regard. But otherwise, you are free to have spices. Please go and have something tonight with some spice on it.
Yeah, spices are no different than food. They have to be labeled.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the next one. What about bamboo spoons? They don't seem to be as porous.
Same rule applies, I would say. Same
the
rules
same.
apply. But if it seems super smooth, probably low risk.
Is microwave safe for both gluten-free and gluten items? Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I would just say to make sure to thoroughly clean it. It's the same as like pots and pans. Your other stuff, make sure all crumbs are taken out. Each use. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we find more info about the Wednesday online session that you just mentioned that has the advanced topic discussion?
Oh, on our website, celiac.ca, you'll see a section that says upcoming events. Click on that, and under the, or are you wondering about the 201 and the 101 in the newly diagnosed pathway?
I think it may have been the 201.
Right. Okay, so sign up for the newly diagnosed pathway on our website and you will get that into your inbox.
I just posted the events, upcoming events and activities.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, and yeah, Candace, I see in the chat has said Epicure products are all gluten-free. They are, and they're wonderful. I love cooking with Epicure. No financial gain for the CCA from Epicure with me saying that. I just personally do really like their products. Okay, I see one from Alexis here about toddlers. So I'm just going to read that one. For toddlers, we choose gluten-free bath bubbles because they love putting on a bubble beard. Yes. Yeah, Alexis, totally. I've got 3 kids who have all loved putting on bubble beards, bubble hats, bubble hair, bubble everything. Again, what I would say is very, very, very low risk when it comes to something like that. Your kids would have to eat so many bubbles in order to get cross-contamination. So when we are thinking about how much gluten can we tolerate in our gut in a day, in a 24-hour period before we get villus atrophy, because that's what we're worried about. We can tolerate up to 10 milligrams of gluten a day, which is about the amount of gluten in the tip of a pen. So tiny, 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 minuscule. But when you think about a product like bubbles or shampoo or conditioner, we've studied lipstick. You'd have to actually eat 6 tubes of lipstick or chapstick in order to get any kind of reaction. So having a bubble beard, very low risk. And what I'm worried about, Alexis, is that those gluten-free bath bubbles you're purchasing are 2 or 3 times the price of the other bath bubbles that you might be purchasing. And food is so expensive right now. And I'm seeing so many people in my practice right now who are finding it hard to afford quality, healthy food, that just the awareness that you don't need to buy the gluten-free bath products or hair products can be very, very helpful. So if you choose and you feel better getting that gluten-free bath bubble, absolutely go for it. But knowing that you don't have to, your child's still going to be safe. They'd probably have, I mean, the amount of bubbles they'd have to eat would give them such diarrhea anyways that we wouldn't
Kind of
want to
hope
go
it
there.
would be. Yeah.
We wouldn't want to go there. So, but I love it. I love just the image of it because I've got so many memories of my kids doing that. Okay, where are we?
One from Nick. How about imported products? Will Canada label products that may contain gluten?
Yeah, so again, great question. Yeah, so if you see a product that does not have French on it, it means that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency or in Health Canada has not had their stamp of approval on it. So be careful so if anything comes into the country and it's sold here legally, it should have been approved by Health Canada and the CFIA, and it will be, you can trust that label. Okay, anything that comes in here and is purchased, you can trust that label. If you notice that that label only has English on it, it means that it's not abiding by our labeling laws, because in Canada we legally have to have both English and French. And that is just one of the surefire ways to know, oh, this product hasn't been reviewed, so I know it hasn't come here in through the proper channels, and it might not be safe for me because I don't know what the labeling laws from that place, if they're the same as Canada or not. So good question. But yes, everything sold here needs to be approved.
Yeah, needs to follow Canadian label laws.
Yeah.
One from Julie. We bought new grill racks for our barbecue as we were told that you couldn't heat the grill high enough to kill gluten. Is that true?
Yeah, so no heat, no amount of heat will kill gluten. I've heard this several times. Oh, it's in a deep fryer. The heat's high enough, it'll kill gluten. That's a myth. That is not true. I don't know where this myth perpetuated from, but it's not true. So Julie, you're absolutely right. You cannot kill gluten with heat. What you could do is, I don't know how old the barbecue is, how clean you could get the racks. Definitely safest just to buy new ones and to recycle the others. But if you can actually scrape it and get it clean enough, you can reuse it. Or as I said, use some tinfoil if that's not within the realm of possibility for your family.
Anita, you mentioned gluten lipstick. We don't need to use gluten-free lipstick. So no, you don't need to use gluten-free lipstick. You would have to ingest so many tubes of it to actually even notice a difference. So you're
And
good.
very few lipsticks would actually contain gluten.
Yeah.
Okay, going back to Pamela. I live alone, but when I visit my sons or other relatives, they don't seem to take this seriously. Figuring I've eaten gluten for years, so a bit won't kill me. I've been diagnosed less than a month now, and I'm being so careful. Pamela, I think your words could be repeated by almost everybody in our community, that this disease is not taken as seriously as it needs to be. So you're not alone, first and foremost. You are in good company here tonight. And I've said this many times on different webinars. I've been called high maintenance as a parent because I'm advocating for my daughter, especially when she was little, and people roll their eyes and they're like, oh, you're fine. Like, it's enough. Well, it's not bothering them, right? It's fine because they don't understand. And they're coming from a place of ignorance. And I don't say that in a negative way, but they truly are. They don't understand the ins and outs of celiac disease. And so to them, it appears as though we might be making a bigger deal of something than we are. And so that takes education. So what I would say is I would invite your family member or your friends to attend a gluten-free 101 or to learn a little bit more about celiac disease, and do it in a kind and respectful way, but so that they actually understand that even the smallest crumb can affect you. And sometimes we get cross-contaminated and we don't even know where the heck it came from. So dining out can be very risky, and it can be very anxiety provoking for our community, from people of all ages, because I mean, my daughter will vomit and she will be sick for the next 24 hours. And that's not pleasant. And my husband, he will get very dizzy and brain foggy, and then just generally feeling unwell. And he is, as he progresses in his disease, starting to get more and more gut issues as well. So this isn't something to be taken lightly. This is your health. This is your well-being. And you are allowed to stand up for yourself and say, this is why. If you feel like going into the explanation, go into the explanation. If you don't, then just say, I'm just opting out tonight. Thanks, guys, from the food because I don't want to get sick. But education is our key to understanding with our family members. But you're not alone.
What about eating out? So I think eating out is a whole other, we could do a whole other webinar on eating out. I think this one was more focused on cross-contamination in the home, but we will do, if it's something you're interested in, we can do a webinar on cross-contamination when eating out or
In
away from
fact,
the home.
do we not have one planned for next year?
I
Kaylee
think
and
we
I
did.
just did our webinar lineup for 2024, and I believe dining out was one of the webinars that we were
Yes,
going to
we
talk
did.
about.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
stay
so keep
tuned for
that.
that. It will be coming in 2024. We've got an exciting education lineup planned for next year. So that is one of them.
One on travel too. So
One on travel. Two of the hottest topics. So we've got some exciting webinars ahead. How safe are regular dried beans and legumes not labeled gluten-free? Not. So dried beans and legumes need to be visually inspected and rinsed or purchased gluten-free. So in particular, lentils are really high risk. They've been clocking really high in the parts per million when they're tested. So what we want you to do with, now this is exclusive to dried. If it's canned or if it's in soup or chilies, you're safe. Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear. But if it's dried, and again, in our gluten-free 101 in the video, I actually show myself pouring lentils onto a cookie sheet, shaking them up, and then you're going to visually inspect and see, do I see any foreign grains or particles? Okay, everything looks good. They all look uniform. I'm going to now rinse them off, make sure there is no dust or contamination that way, and then they're safe. Again, we are aware that any time that gluten-free symbol is popped on a product, the cost can go up. So if cost is a barrier, there's another safe way to do it.
I just popped the food labeling guides link in the chat too, so people can download that. It addresses all those concerns.
Amazing. Thank you. Where are we at? Ooh, when traveling to southern destinations, it is important to stay at a place that has a dedicated, or is it important to stay at a place that has a dedicated gluten-free kitchen or cook? As someone with celiac, have you had success traveling to all-inclusive resorts? Do you have any recommendations for choosing a safe place to stay for those with celiac disease? I've got one recommendation, is go to our Facebook group. This question comes up in our, so if anybody doesn't know about our Facebook group, we've got a really active Facebook group. Kaylee, is it 20,000 now? How many people do we have?
It's closer to 23,000 now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's growing rapidly.
So almost 23,000 people you can poll and say, and honestly, Mallory, all you need to do is say names of tropical all-inclusive celiac safe resorts, and you're going to get a whole bunch. I am not an all-inclusive traveler. I haven't traveled all-inclusive since we've been diagnosed. I tend to go somewhere with a kitchen in our unit. So I'm not the person to ask that question for, but I know there are lots of people out there. No, you don't have to go to a gluten-free the place you go travel to doesn't have to have a dedicated gluten-free kitchen. As with anywhere that we eat, that's very unlikely when you're dining out, but they can prepare your food safely. So that much I know. But as for resort names, I don't have any for you, but I know there's lots of people out there who do. And the other thing I will say to that, Valerie, is that there are celiac cruises, which I'm dying to get to. They're really expensive, but they look really, really fun. And they're often on a Royal Caribbean ship, and they do have a dedicated gluten-free kitchen, and you're traveling with a whole celiac group. And I just can't wait to one day get on it. I keep hoping that maybe they'll invite me to be a speaker on one. But I haven't had that opportunity yet. So hopefully one day, but that is an opportunity for travel in an all-inclusive setting on a cruise. Okay, will this be taped? Yes, Margaret, this is being taped, and it is going to you will be sent the video recording of it.
Yeah, all of our webinars are taped, recorded, and posted on our YouTube channel.
And you will also be getting a follow-up email with some resources. All right, how are we doing here?
Um, what about restaurants and eating out? So yeah, that one we'll have to do a separate
Yeah.
webinar on.
Yeah.
That's coming up next year.
And we are going to do that. And whoever that was who asked that question, you can also come to one of our gluten-free 101s. We do cover dining out within those every month. So if you're kind of thinking, but I want to know now, we do give you a little kind of intro in the gluten-free 101s. And then next year, we're going to go into the real deep dive into it.
I'll also post one of our, we have a web page with some information. So if you want to do that in the meantime.
And Aaliyah, I see just posted on the Celiac Cruises. Thank you for posting that. Tempting me yet again to go on one.
That would be so fun.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it though?
Maddie, sorry. So are all lentils and legumes that are in cans and not labeled gluten-free, are they fine?
Sorry, I took my sip right at the wrong time. Are you answering that, Kaylee? Are you, sorry, I saw something came up there. Canned things are fine. Just give it a good rinse.
Yeah.
Always rinse anything that comes out of a can, just from a dietetics perspective, guys, not even just for gluten. Anything that you drain, rinse it as well, just to make sure that you're getting all of, it rinses some of the sodium off. And we always want to make sure, because canned products tend to be really high in sodium. So for anybody with high blood pressure or any other issues with salt, we want to really give those a good rinse. Reduces the amount of sodium. Alexis, does CCA offer courses, workshops on how to eat out properly? The right questions to ask and courses online. Okay, so Alexis, you're speaking my language. This is what the newly diagnosed pathway is. So we are currently on newly diagnosed pathway 1.0. We're making a 1.5 as you speak, and then 2.0 is hopefully actually going to be in a course format. Currently, we are in an email format. And within that, we do have emails and information on questions to ask for dining out. Not a workshop per se, but certainly something that we can think about in the future. But yes, the newly diagnosed pathway does have all that information in there.
Just linked it too if you're curious.
Super. Anonymous, what about buying a frying pan nonstick from a secondhand store? If it has minimal scratches, would it be okay if it was washed? Also, next question, what about products that say they're gluten-free, but later are recalled for undeclared gluten? Makes me nervous to trust foods that aren't certified gluten-free. Okay, first half of that question. Frying pan from a secondhand store. Very low risk. Very low risk. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you have
just
something
make
to add
sure
to that,
it's
Kaylee?
washed and yeah.
Yeah, well washed, low risk.
I would pick the one with minimal scratches, like you
Yeah.
said. And yeah, it would be fine.
Yeah, but very low risk. Food recalls, as best as we can, Health Canada is on it, CFIA is on it. We have to trust the label. If we get into the what ifs, this product gets recalled, we're going to drive ourselves crazy. So I always really lean into we can trust the labels here in Canada. Let's try to, we want to increase the variety in our diet, not decrease it. And buying only labeled gluten-free food items is very expensive, and that's a barrier to a lot of our community. So we have to trust the labels. Food recalls, Kaylee and I watch food recalls. There's only been a handful of them in the past several years. This doesn't happen very often. And when a recall does happen, it's generally only for a small amount of products. It's not like it was the Cavendish one that comes to my mind most recently. The Cavendish hash browns had a recall last year or 2 years ago. Again, only for lot number ABC, right? So very, very small amounts. So again, when we're talking about risk assessment, if you're going to avoid all of that product, all the products that aren't labeled gluten-free, the risk to affecting your quality of life is much higher, and increasing your anxiety is much higher than the actual risk of getting a product that will then be recalled. So I really encourage you to just kind of try to diffuse that anxiety in the fact that the number of recalls that happen are very, very minimal. And when they even do happen, the number of products that have been contaminated are even more minimal. So very, very, very low risk. Hope that was helpful. Do you want to read out Julie's?
Is it safe to buy gluten-free labeled foods in the US? I do understand the oats issue there.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, it's safe to purchase gluten-free products in the US with the exception, in my opinion, of Cheerios and Lucky Charms.
Mhm.
Cheerios in the States are the same as Cheerios here. Lucky Charms are the same as the Lucky Charms up here. We have different, we recalled that gluten-free label up here because of the testing and sorting mechanisms of those cereals. Again, I'm going to go back to the fact that Canada is really, really, really strict. I will bring to everybody's awareness that barley is not a priority allergen in the US. So it's not, sorry, not a priority allergen. It's not necessarily labeled on products in the US. So if barley is an ingredient in a food on the US, it's not necessarily called out on the label. And we know that barley is a real issue for people with celiac disease. So when I'm in the States, I tend to purchase more labeled gluten-free items than not, so that I know they're safe for my family. If it's something like carrots, cucumbers, fruit, meat, that's fine. You're fine. You're safe. If I'm buying a packaged product, I'm more likely to purchase something that says gluten-free on it, because I'm never sure where barley is going to show up in a product if I don't know it's safe. I don't know the food labels well enough down there. But yes, purchasing something with a gluten-free label, with the exception of those cereals that I mentioned, is absolutely safe.
Mhm.
They have the same threshold of the 20 parts per million that we do here in Canada, and we otherwise run very closely in our labeling laws.
My GI also said not to trust other countries' gluten-free products because only Canada has stringent rules. Fact or fiction?
Fiction, fiction. We've got a huge community of people who've traveled to several places, and actually Mark Johnson is one of the webinars that you need to go back and look to, anonymous attendee. He does a lot of traveling. He actually walks through some of the safe places to travel to and the more difficult places to travel. But I will say off the top of my head, like the European Union standards for labeling are amazing. They bold their priority allergens, so it's actually easier to read their labels. The UK is amazing, not technically part of the European Union, but I know our team traveled to Italy last year, Spain last year, Portugal last year. Incredible labeling laws, very, very safe. I've personally eaten all across the UK and it's been fine. We've been to Amsterdam, it's been fine. The US is fine. I know places, Australia and New Zealand, have very similar labeling laws to us. So again, very safe to dine in. Some of the places that people have had a little more issue with are some areas in Asia. And of course, language barriers can become an issue. So we've got travel cards that will help you to decipher or how to translate that you have celiac disease in various languages. So please don't be discouraged from traveling. Again, we don't want there to be barriers for our community that don't need to exist. And that is one that doesn't need to exist. So travel, we're going to have a whole webinar on it next year. And again, if you want to come to one of the Gluten-Free 101s, Linda, who is the co-host for that, she has a great deal of travel experience. She's going to Dubai in the fall. She's going to Italy. She's
Wow.
going to, she travels all over the place. So she's got a huge amount of vast knowledge. So also, if you wanted to email or call that phone line, she will answer those questions for you.
Yeah, I also posted, we have an excellent resource on our website all about travel. Mark Johnson actually helped write it. And he also did a session at last year's conference. So that's posted as well. And there's tips to read like US labeling, to read US labels. So you know you're safe when you travel.
Amazing. Okay, I do notice that it's 5:03, so if anybody needs to go, no offense taken. If we see the numbers dropping down, we'll answer a few more questions, guys, and then we will go. But I hate to leave questions unanswered in the question box, but we only have a couple. So I see we've been dancing around. Diane asked about melamine mixing bowls to be safe. I think I know what melamine is. Is it
I
like a
know.
hard plastic? I know
Any
I
type
should
of
know what melamine
plastic,
is, but I'm not 100% sure, Diane. I'm so sorry.
any type of
Um,
plastic or silicone or steel mixing bowls can be used. They're
mhm.
safe. We just try
So
to avoid
I
wooden.
think yeah. Julie, we had dinner at my son's house last week. He's celiac like me. His wife made gravy with chicken, better than bouillon. I asked what she used and she said it was gluten-free. I remember reading a label at Costco stating it contained gluten, but when we read her label, it didn't say. I checked online afterwards and they can't guarantee it. Was it not why is it not disclosed on the label? Yeah, so this gets into our real labeling laws, and this is kind of into the nitty-gritty of the labeling laws. So anytime you call or email a company, they cannot tell you that a product is gluten-free because it hasn't been officially tested to be less than 20 parts per million. So that's why we really discourage people from calling or emailing, because you're going to get a customer representative who just has no authority in saying, yes, it's gluten-free, you're safe. Because if they say that and then that something happens, then they're liable. All we can say is, and I do know that sometimes products at Costco can be slightly different than products elsewhere, which is why we say read the label every time, because remember, labels can change. Companies have the right to change ingredients at any point in time, but they have to update their labeling. So always read the label. And if the label is free from barley, rye, regular oats, and wheat from the may contains or ingredients list, then you're safe to have it. Bouillon cubes are included in that. Do you have anything to add to that, Kaylee?
No, yeah, I think you covered that.
Okay.
Is caffeinated tea and herbal tea naturally gluten-free?
Yeah, would have to say on the ingredients list.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything else, it would have to say.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, CCA group is traveling to Italy this October. I wish I was joining everybody.
Italy is
But I
the
know
best.
Linda is, and I think Liz is our president.
Yeah.
So you're going to be in good company.
Um,
Oh, and
what's
oh, Jose.
the
Oh, Jose. That's a tough one. You had to bring up. So we have a corn statement on our website. Kaylee, you might want to link that into the website. Corn is tricky, guys. Corn is another hour-long conversation. I will say this: if you're purchasing corn tortilla chips, if you're purchasing corn tortillas, if you're purchasing corn flour, it needs to be labeled gluten-free.
Mm-hmm. It's more so with the processing of it. Like,
yes,
whole corn, you don't need to worry about.
okay.
Corn kernels, you don't need to worry about. It's the processing. So it's the flour, it's the cornmeal.
Yeah.
Cornstarch is fine,
Yeah.
very minimal risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, corn flour and cornmeal are what you need to be
Yeah.
cautious.
Aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we also, a good question here, are we supposed to avoid all oats in our first year of being diagnosed? So recommendations are going to vary on this in actual fact. And we had an oat panel discussion on this recently. And so the official recommendation from the CCA currently is to avoid all oats until your TTG has normalized, and then we can introduce gluten-free oats and see how you feel. So here's the why behind that recommendation. So I always like to make sure that my patients or my clients understand why. Why are you telling me this? Because if I learn something and I don't know why, then I'm less likely to follow the rules. So why do you need to do this? It's because there's a certain subset of our population who the protein in oats actually triggers the same sort of symptoms as gluten does. The protein in oats isn't going to raise your TTG. It's not going to affect your TTG level. So be assured in that, but it might make you feel unwell and you might think I'm not getting better because I'm not feeling well. If we remove oats entirely, there's kind of two ways you can go about this. If we avoid oats entirely, your TTG comes down, you're feeling good, and then we know, okay, gut's healing, you're doing well, let's now introduce oats, see how you do. See if you're one of that subset of the population that oats are an issue with, then we can do that. That's strategy one, okay? Strategy two, which we tend to use with kids a little bit more, because look for a gluten-free granola bar that doesn't contain oats, and I'm, it's hard to find. And we know our kids, like, what are we going to pack for lunches? What are we going to make that they like? They tend to be pickier eaters in the first place, so we want to make sure that we're creating as much variety as we can. So here's option two for you guys. we switch to gluten-free oats. If symptoms continue and persist and your kid's just not feeling better, then we cut out oats. Then we go, okay, I wonder if it's oats actually that are causing the problem. Let's cut it out and see if that's the issue. I do this all the time. This is a practice point I use all the time. So that's the other, Jose, that's the other strategy that we could take. So strategy one is that you eliminate it. You see how you're feeling. If you're feeling well, you introduce it. Strategy two, you eliminate all gluten-containing products, or sorry, you eliminate all gluten-containing products, but you continue with gluten-free oats. Watch your THG go down. If you're feeling fine, you can just keep on them. If you're feeling unwell, then we can take them out. I hope that was clear. I feel like that was really messy.
I can add the resource as well, just in case people want to read.
All right. Yes, Jose, you opened a can of worms. You opened a can of corn. Jose, I'm wondering if I recognize your name. That's all I'm going to say. I recognize your name. Is celiac or gluten sensitivity hereditary? Yes. I'm newly diagnosed and have 2 small kids. Okay, great question. This is a really important question. Gluten sensitivity, no, not hereditary. Celiac disease, yes, it's an autoimmune disease that's genetically inherited. So one of your parents, one of your genetically related parents carries the gene. It's DQ2 or DQ8. It's an HLA. So one of you carries the gene. So yes, all first-degree relatives should be screened for celiac disease, regardless of symptoms. We're finding a lot of kids are being diagnosed asymptomatic, so they actually don't have any symptoms because they've had a first-degree relative who's been diagnosed, and then they're being tested, and we're discovering that they actually, in fact, have celiac disease. What is a first-degree relative? It is a sibling, it is a parent, or it is a child. So regardless of symptoms, get tested because we know it's hereditary. We got to wrap this up.
Did those for oats. What is normalized? I went from 3,000.
What is a normalized TTG?
Yeah. Can I try oats? Yes, I would say 3,000 to 9. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went from 3,300 to in 9 months. I don't see another number there. Am I not seeing that right? Am I not reading that right? Yes, but Brenda, try gluten-free oats. If you're feeling good, try them. Try them. Is there a way to get diagnosed without eating gluten? No, Holly, at this point in time, we don't have diagnostic criteria unless you have gluten in your system. I'm so sorry. The gluten challenge, we have a video on our website. We have a video on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. Check that out. It's misery. I get it. We get it. It's not ideal. They are working on this in the research. If this is a concerned community out there who is still listening, this is where your money comes in. Like, this is where research can be funded. So it's something that they're definitely looking at. Some exciting research is being done on interleukin-2 and how it spikes after a single ingestion. So lots of promising research on that coming down the pipe. Anyways, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today and hanging in for this hour and 12 minutes. I know that it can feel long. Join us for our future webinars next month. I am talking with Dr. Pinto Sanchez, and we are talking about vaccinations and celiac disease. What vaccinations do you need and why? Really interesting hot topic right now. So join us for that. Sign up on our website. November, we've got our conference coming. So we have a really excited one-day lineup of speakers. And then in December, we're going to have a holiday celebration. So join us for that, how to tackle those holidays and how to troubleshoot and problem solve, going to the relative's house, going to the friend's house, what cocktails can I have, all that good stuff. So lots and lots coming up. And of course, gluten-free 101s every month. Our magazine's coming out, our Celiac Connects, so much happening.
There's a lot of content coming.
So much coming up in the fall. That's exciting. So check out our website for everything that you need to know. I'm going to say goodnight from North Vancouver. Kaylee's saying goodnight from PEI. Oh,
and
she's
we'll
from.
Good night from PEI, everyone. We'll send you a follow-up email shortly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Kaylee. It's always a treat to have you on.
It was amazing.
Love
Thank you so
hosting with
much.
you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Night.
For now.